This is low-key one of the panels that I've been looking forward to the most. And it is called Sufficiently Decentralizing, which is a play on words from what came out of the Commissioner Hinman? Yeah, the Hinman test, right? Informal comments from an SEC commissioner about a year ago now regarding what it would take to not trip over the infamous Howey test when it comes to tokens and whether they are securities or non-securities, which is really the only thing that matters for US-based teams. David Vorik at Saya has spent a lot of time on this, both with his protocol Saya, but also thinking about how to sufficiently decentralize proof-of-work protocols. He's written a lot on the subject, some fascinating insights into the proof-of-work mining ecosystem. Luis Quende from Aragon, literally writing a book on how to manage decentralized autonomous organizations and their governance protocol, Aragon, has been in the news for a variety of reasons. He's going to talk a little bit about some of those challenges and some of the opportunities for decentralized governance. And then Mona Elisa from Melon, now Avantgarde, actually blew up their original token creating organization out of Switzerland. And now it is a fully DAO-driven governance model. Rebecca Rettig from Fisher Broyles is going to moderate the discussion. I'm looking forward to this one. Rebecca, take it away.
Thanks so much, Ryan. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our panel. As Ryan said, my name is Rebecca Rettig. I'm a partner at a law firm called Fisher Broyles. I'm co-head of our FinTech and blockchain practice group, and I've actually, over the past year, been working with a lot of projects on decentralizing and what that means and how to do it properly and how to do it securely. So I'm super excited with this panel too. And I want to turn it over to everybody briefly. Mona, why don't you start to just do a quick intro and also to talk about what your project is, and then we'll hop into discussions of what you've done on decentralization and what stage you're at and things like that.
Hi again, I'm Mona Elisa. I'm the co-founder. I was the co-founder of Melonport before we dissolved it in February 2019. So just for a little bit of history, Melonport was founded in 2016. At that point, we put our roadmap forward. We put a 2-year roadmap forward and proposed to build the first completely decentralized on-chain asset management protocol, like an infrastructure for the future of finance. In February 17, we did a small token sale, and then we sort of set out to deliver our roadmap. 2 years on, V1 was released, and we became, I'm sure we became the first DeFi protocol in history to completely decentralize our governance. We did that via handing over to a DAO-based governance, which is, I think, a little unique in terms of what I'm seeing in DeFi now. Yeah. And it's run and operated on Aragon OS. So I'm very honored to be next to Luis. Here we've worked a lot. Our teams have worked a lot together in the past. And so we handed over governance in February 19. The protocol has been living on through the DAO structure since that point. The governance basically controls 3 aspects of the protocol. It's basically upgrading the contracts, adjusting network parameters, and resource allocation for grants towards maintainers or developers on the protocol. I guess towards the end of last summer, we became the second project in history to apply for a grant to become the lead developer of the protocol. And that's my newer company, Avantgarde Finance. We're one of a couple of teams now. We're one of the bigger teams building on the Melon protocol, but there's a few smaller ones as well. So that's pretty much it from my side, I guess, as an intro.
That's great. Luis?
Cool, yeah. So Mona did a bit of an intro for me in terms of Aragon and DAOs, but I'm the co-founder of Aragon, and Aragon basically makes DAOs possible. So DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. And so we've been working since 2016, basically since the DAO happened, like that big hack that happened in 2016, shortly after we tried to actually make DAOs happen without all of the issues that they had and that we discovered early on. And so right now there are 1,400 DAOs that have been created with Aragon. There are like about $10 million that are stored on them, but the the number of assets secured by this DAO economy is much larger. If you think about protocols like Melon, like Decentralized, which also uses Aragon. And so, yeah, we're trying to build basically a platform for DAOs to exist and to be actually decentralized and actually autonomous, which is the end goal. And also providing the kind of base protocol, the Aragon network, which provides services to these DAOs to exist. For example, dispute resolution, which is something that you cannot do in like a fully online kind of world. You cannot like go to like a traditional court, or you cannot like resolve all of these kind of disputes or problems that are more subjective and that like smart contracts don't cover because they're code. So yeah, that's a bit of an intro of Aragon.
Great. David?
Yep. So my name is David Vorik. I'm lead developer of the SIA platform. And our approach to governance is a little bit more like how Bitcoin does it, where you have a proof of work based blockchain, and there's actually no on-chain governance or on-chain voting. And so we see things more from a sociological perspective, where it's like, if you want to push out an upgrade, to be fully decentralized, you need users to consent to the upgrade. And so every change that we make to the protocol is fully opt-in. And if that's tricky, because it means when you make a change, the ecosystem can split. If half the users like the change, or a third of the users like the change and the rest don't, you end up with two completely separate protocols, or two completely separate chains. But we like that because that means that both sides of the split get the governance, or get the protocol that they want. And so you don't have the situation where a majority is outvoting a minority and being oppressive.
Yeah. What I think is great is that there are three very different models for decentralization represented here, and they're all totally different than some of the more recent versions of decentralization that we've seen as well, for something like Compound, which is decentralizing through community-based governance. Just announced it. It's gotten a lot of traction, and it basically has turned over administration of the protocol to holders of the governance token, and also, those stakeholders who have built on top of the protocol as well. So something to think about as we're all chatting about this today as well. So, Mona, since you are, I don't know if I'd even say sufficiently decentralized, I'd say completely decentralized. Why don't you talk about sort of the successes, and does what you created today with the DAO look like what you thought you were going to create back in 2016? And if not, how is it different? And
I just thought maybe before jumping into that, maybe just a quick description on how our governance actually works.
It'd be great.
So I guess like we try to think of things as holistically as possible, and what we kind of identified when kind of thinking about our governance is that we have, if you break it down, we have three main stakeholders in our ecosystem, and those groups of stakeholders are: number one, the token holders; number two, the future maintainers and developers of the protocol; and number three is actually often not always overlooked, the users. And so when you look at our token design and how that matches up with the different alignments of stakeholders, the token design is a buy and burn model, and so it directly links the usage of the protocol to the value of the token. So that kind of takes care of the token holders, and it takes care of the maintainers and developers. But the group that we identified as the unrepresented stakeholder group were the users ultimately, even though the users could acquire tokens, but they shouldn't be obliged to acquire tokens in our view. So, and they might not be able to as well. There's obviously a financial commitment there as well. So when we thought about designing governance, our number one focus was how can we represent and somehow protect the users? Because ultimately, if you don't represent users, then ultimately you're going to fail. Like, users need to be, without users, you don't really have a success story. So so we designed our governance in a very user-centric way. And so in our case, to be able to be a part of the DAO, you have to be either technically skilled, like very knowledgeable about, the underlying software, but specifically also the Melon protocol, or you have to be a user representative nominated by other users, and you have to be able to prove that you are a user, like a proper user, not just like a small test fund, but actually there are certain metrics that we would measure that by. So in doing that, and there's a sort of ratio that we try to adhere to, like, more technical representatives versus user representatives. But the idea is that the people who represent future upgrades or network parameters have some ability and skill to judge whether this upgrade is, an upgrade that makes sense for the protocol, et cetera, et cetera. To David's point, even in the Melon protocol, it's an opt-in by the user. So we don't force an upgrade on everyone, or, if just because the council votes on an upgrade, it doesn't mean that the users have to opt in. But basically, the way, the council will recommend or suggest an upgrade, and then users can opt into that. So that's kind of how we designed it. February 19th, there are 8 members on the DAO right now, and slowly looking to grow that. But before we look to grow the number of members, we have received interest from other applicants, and we are actively pursuing that. We want to make sure before we grow that the processes internal are really working as they should be working. And, and I think the first year of governance has taught us a lot of lessons. In 2019, one of the lessons was just because you're decentralized and just because you're a DAO doesn't mean that you don't need leadership, someone to drive, set the agenda, et cetera, et cetera. And so we came up with this concept sometime last year that we would have a rotating chair and vice chair, which rotates every 6 months, just so that we kind of give somebody accountability and responsibility to drive the agenda forward, et cetera. More recently, we've been discussing, well, we have a pretty good process for adding new people to the DAO, but shouldn't we also be thinking about removing non-performers from the DAO? I mean, it's all written down that you can remove, but everyone's a little bit too polite, to kind of say, well, he's not doing that job properly, et cetera. And so having more concrete KPIs and metrics to measure the performance of certain DAO members, I think is something that we could improve on and that we're discussing internally. So those are a couple of, ideas and lessons we've learned. And maybe actually, I touched on this earlier in my presentation as well, is, the resource allocation. Again, we feel that, a lot of basically, when you have a DAO, when you decentralize governance, you realize that decentralization comes at a trade-off, and that trade-off is efficiency. And so whether we like to admit it or not. And so you have to make sure that the processes that you put in place are extremely robust. Ultimately, obviously, I mean, that's why we're all here discussing governance. But it's a lot more intricate than it may seem. And it's not just because something is technologically elegant that it means it's the best solution, but there are also considerations, real world considerations that are important. For example, reputation and identity. In our case, we enforce the fact that members of the DAO have to be, publicly known and identifiable and adhering to some kind of fiduciary duty. So yeah, I'll stop there. I'm sure we can come back to this, but I want to make sure others get a chance to talk.
Yeah, I have a quick question though, just out of my own personal interest with respect to the voting on different types of things. Do you have weighted voting if it's a technological upgrade? Does somebody have a sort of a more weighted vote than somebody else? Versus a user or someone who's
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good question. So like within the Melon Council DAO, we have 2 subgroups. One is like the Melon Technical Council, and one is like the user representatives. We call them the Melon Exposed Businesses. And so on technical upgrades, we wouldn't expect user representatives to vote on a technical upgrade. So we actually worked closely with the Aragon team we came up with the processes, but when we implemented this on Aragon OS, it's quite nice. I would do a screen share, but I don't have, but it's actually really cool to check out the Aragon interface that we use, to manage our day-to-day activities. But basically when you trigger a vote, and if it's a technical vote, only the MTC, the Melon Technical Council, can vote on it, and it has to reach that threshold. And if you trigger a vote which everyone is eligible to vote, then basically the whole Melon Council can vote on it. So it really depends on what you're voting on and who who has the expertise in that field.
It's great. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Luis, it seems like a perfect segue to talk to you. I just made hands like showing everybody where you are on my screen. Why don't you jump in and talk a little bit about Aragon and where you're at?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of like governance, like the one that like Mona was describing, I think that is a very interesting use case that we have seen like more protocols kind of like jump on. So like I like to say that DeFi was pretty much like CeFi like some months ago, right? Now it's still like changing, like slowly changing. But like, Aragon perfectly supports that. So I'm really happy about it. I think in terms of trade-offs, like the trade-offs are really real. Like you have efficiency versus scale. I think the DAOs and decentralized governance are great for scale, not so much for efficiency. And then the other thing is like private versus public. Like as Mona was saying, sometimes you cannot like provide feedback publicly to like people that, for example, like you want to remove from a DAO or stuff like that. Because if it happens, then there's this thing about like praising public and criticizing private, right? And so when you are in an open environment, in open governance, you have to also criticize in public. So that's been kind of a learning. In terms of our own governance, like it's been challenging because we both have kind of like the responsibility of pioneering how other DAOs are going to act, and then we have our own DAO. So we really don't want to screw it up because we have to be like kind of exemplary. So in our case right now, the services that the Aragon network provides at the protocol level, they are controlled by a council that was chosen by ANT holders. So they don't even have like full governance power yet. Well, they have through the council, but not like purely decentralized governance we would want to. And that's because we're still working on the details. And like one interesting kind of assumption that we all have in this space is that people are going to take good decisions and you can like leverage the wisdom of the crowd. But it is not that easy. Like if you just put like a huge amount of like inflation or a huge amount of cash or like a bunch of very important protocol parameters and you let people decide with no incentives whatsoever, they are probably just going to do whatever is best for the short term, right? And they are going to drain the protocol. They are going to change parameters to their most interesting incentive short term, and then basically screw over like the long term of the protocol. So I think that is very important, and that's why like we've been doing research on very interesting like mechanisms for funding allocation and like kind of like parameterization of protocols. And it's something that takes months to use like research into it. So but I'm super excited to see like once we have like templates or like kind of like guides or case studies, like once like you can just see like Melon or Compound doing it, and then you can like basically copy and paste the same kind of code or strategy for your product. I think it's going to be like extremely easy for people to decentralize the governance.
Yeah. So my question for you though is in terms of having this template on being easy to transfer onto decentralized governance, that also though has some inherent assumptions about how whoever your governance members are acting, right? So what are the assumptions that underlie just being able to pop up governance quickly in terms of how the members in the governance system are acting?
Yeah, I've seen this very like interesting, like the same way that you have like this kind of like lean startup or like business like canvas where you like draw different participants and like different incentives. I've seen the same for DAOs, and I think it's really interesting. Like I think that is extremely important because at the end of the day, like it's kind of, I heard someone say that Aragon wasn't technology, it was like societal infrastructure or something like that. I didn't even think about it myself, but actually it's kind of true. Like the like social part is even more important than technology that powers it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, when you were talking about it, that's what really came to mind. So I kind of agree with that. Okay, David, tell us where you are. Tell us about your successes. Tell us what your challenges or anything that you are thinking about. And also tell us where you think you are in the process, very early, middle, things like that.
Yeah, no, so I would say we're, as far as decentralizing goes, fairly late in the process because, again, there are no like controls, there's no council, there's no seat. And like the trade-off there is that it means there are no changes. And so if you want to change, it's a very big deal. There's no like process to go through and introduce a change. At the same time, that protects users, and it means that things aren't going to change under your feet. And in particular, I think about the 90% of users that participate in the protocol, but they don't, or rather they use the protocol, but they're not active on the forums. They're not involved in any way. And so we like this approach because it protects what we see to be the inactive 90%. And the way that we move forward as a platform with these controls in place is by doing everything kind of at the layer 2. And so just because the currency is not changing and the block reward's not changing, the block size, the protocol rules aren't changing, doesn't mean that the software is not changing. And so we can make things faster and more efficient. We can introduce new techniques, and we can leverage our smart contracts in new and better ways. And so the protocol is not stagnant from a development perspective, but it is from a like a layer 1 rule set perspective.
And what was your greatest challenge? It's such a different model, just because it is mimicking Bitcoin in some ways. Sort of, what was your greatest challenge in getting there? Was it just, developing the software or developing the network or something else?
Yeah. So I think probably the biggest governance challenge we've had is when Bitmain announced that they'd made a miner for Sia. This was a big event in the Sia community. And so the community had to make this decision, like, do we let Bitmain miners stay or not? And this ended up being just a super involved process. The moment that gets brought up, you get a bunch of sock puppet accounts. People who have never been seen before have accounts that are 3 seconds old, have these long, super informed opinions. And there's just this like giant mess. And it kind of felt a little bit like flying blind, where you had to make a decision, fork or not fork. And then the way our governance is set up, after you make the decision, it's kind of like you see whether or not you were on the right track. And so the way we addressed the problem was we made this opt-in upgrade that protected users on both sides. And so it kind of had this fail-safe mechanism where if we deployed it and then found that we had misread the community and everyone rejects it and stays on the old one, it would be very easy to just collapse back into the old version. And so that was kind of, from an engineering perspective, a difficult thing to set up and a super interesting thing to set up. And then in our case, what happened was the community just overwhelmingly embraced the update. It turned out that pretty much everyone who used the software on a day-to-day basis was very much in favor of the fork, and all the opposition had been mostly smoke and mirrors. But that's, it's something you don't know until users start upgrading, until you put the release out and you see what happens in the community.
That's great. That makes a lot of sense. So we have about 10 minutes left. So with that, I guess I'd like everyone to go around, and maybe we'll start with you, David, and move back, which is sort of what's next for you. And if you had, one piece of advice that you could give to anybody who's working towards decentralizing, what would it be?
Yeah. So for us, I think the next big protocol level change is we want to move from kind of the old way of doing blockchain consensus to using something called U3XO. And this is a super technical, it doesn't change the currency parameters or anything. But it's nonetheless like a big fork and something that everyone's going to have to upgrade to. And so we get to go through this, kind of hands-off, blind governance process again. But my advice to other people looking to set up governance would be that you don't need to change as many things as you think. And so in 5 years of Sia's project history, we've made 2 meaningful forks ever. One to change the difficulty adjustment algorithm, and one to kick Bitmain off the network. And both of these, together were like 100 lines of code in 5 years of operating the network. And yet we've gone from software that could upload, hundreds of megabytes at a time to software that can upload tens of terabytes at a time. And the Sia protocol has developed in incredibly meaningful ways. And we've launched, new things like Skynet on the same old protocol rules that we started with. And so I think my biggest advice to the community would just be that you probably don't need as much governance as you think you need if you are careful about how you structure it to give yourself breathing room to upgrade without making any changes to the rules.
Okay. Luis, I know you're in sort of a different stage, but what do you see is next for you, and what's your parting gift on governance to everybody watching?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with David in that like governance is hard. So if you can minimize it, like the better. If you have to, though, I think our biggest learning right now, because we started Aragon in 2016 and we had to create a legal entity to do that, and then, because there were not DAOs before, so we had to like create a legal entity to actually develop DAOs. But like decentralizing a legal entity, it is very hard. So if you can start off decentralized, you are gonna save a lot of time versus like starting centralized and then decentralizing stuff like legal entities or even like the culture, starting from like a centralized into a kind of like a decentralized community. So yeah, people will be able to take the shortcut maybe next year, maybe in a couple of years. I don't think we are fully ready now, but I think hopefully in a couple of years things will just start off decentralized.
When you say having something where people are starting off decentralized, I see that can happen in two ways. One, I suppose you could just quietly build the product, and then when you launch it, make sure it's launched decentralized. Or as you're building the product, you already have a DAO in place that's sort of working as you build. Are you thinking of those two models? Something different? One of them?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, basically what I'm thinking is that when we thought about like DAOs, we thought about decentralized autonomous organizations, and right now they like pretty much we have fulfilled the O, but we haven't fulfilled the D or the A. And so when they are autonomous, we'll be able to have someone who like posts an idea, and then that idea takes a life of its own, and you have certain incentives of how people can like come and contribute, and then it should just fly, right? That is kind of the litmus test for when a DAO is actually a DAO. And so once we figure it out, then it's going to be kind of mind-blowing. But yeah, it's still a lot of work to do. It's still very early.
Yeah. Okay. Mona, what's next for you, since you're basically completely decentralized and, given that you're in that special spot, what would you sort of want to say to everybody on last piece of advice?
I mean, I think that the piece of it, well, I guess what's next for us is, we have a governance structure right now, but to make sure we're continuously improving it and making sure that we're really trying to maximize the efficiency. That's the part that I think efficiency and accountability. I feel that that's the part that really needs to be better represented. I think there's some very, very strong aspects of our governance, but some could be stronger, and you kind of learn by doing. We were a year in and we learned a lot of lessons. In terms of advice for people, I would say I have two pieces of advice. One is to I touched on it briefly earlier, like do not forget, try when you're designing governance, make sure you're considering all the stakeholders very carefully in your ecosystem, because it's very important that all the incentives are aligned between all of them. And if you miss out one group, it's going to come back to bite you later. Another maybe bigger piece of advice, and less obvious to a tech crowd, is bring in governance experts from the traditional world to battle test your governance models, because most of the people who are designing governance models to decentralize right now don't actually have much experience in governance. And so we found it very useful back at when I had Melonport. We hired a governance expert. He has not, at the time, he had very little expertise in blockchain, but we just kind of explained to him how our ecosystem works, as if and try to kind of remove all the buzzwords from it and say, this is the governance we're thinking of now. Now try to destroy it. What could go wrong? And it's actually, we had 3 kind of big sessions with him, and it's amazing how much stuff he pointed out that it's so, the things that can go wrong in blockchain are very often similar to the things that can go wrong in the traditional non-blockchain, non-tech related world with governance. And so there are definitely a lot of lessons you can learn from experts in the field. And while the technology, there are some very elegant solutions you can do technologically, let's not trade off elegance for sensible governance.
I think because specific to DeFi, if DeFi is really looking to mimic legacy financial instruments, institutions, and things like that, but in a decentralized way, to bring in somebody who knows that legacy system to be able to, test it and have the history, I think is important.
Yeah, well, we're not. I mean, just to be just to be clear, I don't think DeFi is looking to replicate legacy institutions. We are looking to build infrastructure in like the way I see it is we're looking to replicate infrastructure, and so having finance experts in DeFi is obviously important as well in the same way. But I think even governance and finance experience are both important for different reasons, but I see them actually as two different things.
Yeah. When you are talking about efficiency and accountability with respect to something even like a small DAO, that's one thing. But when you talk about something like a much broader system, so just to bring Compound back in, where they're having, all community members or all comp holders who are going to vote on governance, how do you see something like efficiency and accountability working there when you have a very diffuse governance, purposely diffuse governance system?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much, there isn't much of a track record there to go by, but I do know that in general, when you have token holders voting on certain things or stakeholders voting on certain things, generally there tends to be an apathy problem where people just don't vote or don't participate. And so that's the first thing to address. The second thing to address is when they do participate, are they participating in a way that's adding value? And so, maybe the first distribution of governance tokens is to a group of people who know what they're doing and who are incentivized to make the right decisions for the protocol in the best interest of the protocol. But what if they then change hands and are, sold off or end up in the hands of people who don't know what they're doing, or even worse, have some incentive to see you fail? Maybe they're a competing protocol or they're invested in a competing protocol or whatever. And so how do you, without reputation systems and without knowing those parties, how do you mitigate those risks? And I think there were less of a risk when all of our protocols were valued at like $500 million because it was more expensive to do it. But now most of our protocols are valued at a lot less. So it's easier to manipulate these things.
Well, I want to, of course, I'll open the floor to the end if anybody wants to jump in and say anything about decentralization, their platform, before we head out. But I did want to thank Mona, Luis, and David for their time today and for their thoughtfulness. And I actually really loved hearing about 3 very different systems of governance, what it took to get there, and what you're thinking about for the future. Thanks.
Cool, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rebecca. It was great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Had a great time.
A lightning, I think we have like 1 minute left, so I'll think of a lightning round of questions, or a last takeaway, which could be, David, for yours, on efficiency and accountability. Oh, Ryan's coming on, so no lightning questions.
No, I know if you already had your lightning questions, I was just going to come in and ask, what do you think the ultimate resolution of the SEC versus the rest of the world is going to be? And do you think that more US-based projects are going to headquarter overseas and try to move as much of their operations overseas as possible?
Is that a question for me or everybody?
That could be for you and everybody else. Because I know we have 2 international and one and 2 domestic here. So I'm curious what the split is.
Yeah, I don't know about the question itself, but I do think that the SEC is actually push a bunch of protocols to actually be decentralized just because of legality, not even because of morality, but just legality. So I used to hate the SEC, but now I think, well, these people are actually pushing decentralization forward, possibly in an unintended way, but they are.
I agree with Luis. I think that there is, I mean, there's a lot to be said about the SEC versus everybody right now. And I certainly don't think we've seen the last of what's going on, not even with the current cases, but with new things that may come out. But I do think the guidance and the unofficial statements is pushing projects to think about decentralization at a much earlier stage. As everybody on this panel sort of indicated, to think about decentralization at the beginning is an important part. So I do think that's changed the way projects are moving forward. But I'll let Mona and David go too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just make a small comment, which is, you know, I'm one of the international, so we were based in Switzerland before we decentralized. And I would just say that I find, you know, without having followed it too closely, I find that if anything, the governance designs of projects should not be designed around what the SEC does and doesn't consider security or, you know, or decentralized governance. I think they should be designed in the best interest of the protocol, full stop. Unfortunately, you know, projects have to consider the legal side as well, or in implications. But it's just I think it's an unfortunate pressure that may lead to some bad. Maybe, I don't know, but because I actually don't know all the details of what the SEC have said on the subject. But it might, you know, I hope that it doesn't mean that people are pressured to make design decisions in their governance that are not optimal for what they're trying to do.
David, are we going to get a no comment from you?
Yeah, I was going to echo that. Yeah, I was going to say, so we've had dealings with the SEC. We got a fine for a sale we did in 2014. And, you know, pre-DAO, pre anything related to guidance or like raising the issue. And I can definitely say that securities law has really inhibited the types of ideas that we're allowed to have. And so we have lots of ideas for things that you can do with tokens that I think would be super exciting and like super interesting. It's just like, oh, that would be a security. And so we just have to throw it away. And so on that front, I do think that there's substantial pressure for a lot of this innovation to move overseas and to move to a jurisdiction where, you know, every little thing isn't going to be under heavy scrutiny and subject to, you know, disproportionate fines.
Amen. Well, as a US-based team that wants to see a lot of fellow entrepreneurs succeed and do so without quite so much red tape, I will echo that to the heavens. So thank you all for joining. This is a great enlightening panel, and appreciate you coming on. Stay safe.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.